All right, so our last section of chapter 448 is on complex numbers, okay? And complex numbers can be very difficult for a lot of students to understand. So we're going to make this video in two parts, okay? But here we go. What's our objective for your notes for 4.8? To identify, we're not going to graph these, but perform operations with complex numbers. And we're also going to find complex number solutions for the quadratic formula. If you remember at the end of 4.7, I said, hey, we're going to learn to handle these situations where we have no solutions or a negative underneath that square root or a negative as that discriminant. And we're going to learn to deal with that in this lesson. Okay, guys? All right. How do you write the square root of negative 18? All right, so normally in the past, we would say this right here is no solution, and that is true. But mathematically, we have a way to represent these in terms of an imaginary sense, okay? And what we do is we kind of break this in two parts. We kind of bring this negative by itself. We write the negative. We kind of bring this negative square root of 1 out, okay? So then we have a positive right there. And then the square root of a negative 1 is actually I. Okay, so that's how we start off by writing it. Now we're also going to work on something you did quite a bit in Algebra 1, which is simplifying radicals. Okay, we got 18. Remember going back to Algebra 2 days, Algebra 1 Ichi days. Okay, that would be 9 times 2 or 6 times 3. And that'd be a 3, 3, and a 2. And if you remember, you used to break this down in that you had 2 3s and a 2. And remember, we have an imaginary number in that root there, which is a 2. So if you have 2 of something, remember, it comes outside. So that would be 3, whoops, I don't know why my pen's freaking out, 3i square root 2. And that's what that would simplify to be, okay? Now, that was probably a lot to take in, so let's try another one, okay? Square root of negative 50. All right, so what do we do first? Well, remember, we break this up into the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 50. Now, the square root of negative 1 is what at home? Well, it's just I, Mr. T. And then remember, we want to break down 50. How do we break down 50? Well, we want to know if there's a perfect square. And there actually is a perfect square. What I mean by a perfect square is 2 of something. So you have 2 5s and a 2. Well, I have one group there. So if I have one group, 1 comes out. And since that dude is just lonely, chilling out, that dude's got to stay in the house. All right, that's it. Let's do one more to make sure we're perfect monies all over it. What could be a little bit tough? Well, let's go with maybe a, okay. Square root of negative 40. Well, what do I do there? Well, square root of negative 1 times square root of 40. What's the square root of negative 1 at home? It's I. All right, which allows us to deal with the square root of 40. Now, whoa, what the heck is that? That's 4 times 10. Well, both of them, that's a 2 and a 2. Oh, I got 2 of something, sweetie sweets, and that's a 2 and a 5. Okay, well, what the heck? I have 3 2s. But remember, you need 2 of something to bring that bad boy out. So I only have one group of 2, so only 1 2 comes out. That means that other 2 and the 5 got to stay inside. You can't come out of the house. Okay, you're grounded. All right, so we go 2 times 5, which is 10, and that would be that bad boy. Okay, so that's practicing a lot of those problems, right? But that's how we deal with an I. Should I do one more here? I think you guys are good to go. I mean, look at that bad boy right there. That's just the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 7, which is I square root 7, right? Because you cannot even, 7, how do I break down a 7? That's just 1 times 7. You don't have 2 of anything, so they both stay inside. Oh, I guess that one's a little bit different, huh? Let's do B, square root of negative 25. Well, what's that? Well, Mr. T, that's just negative 1 times the square root of 25, which is I. Class, what's the square root of 25? That's just 5, right? And I could break that down if I wanted to. A 5 and a 5, 2 of them comes out. If it comes out and nothing is left on the inside, it gets rid of the square root, or it gets rid of the radical. Okay, so my final answer, whenever you get rid of everything, we usually put the I behind. So it would be 5I. All right, hopefully not too bad so far. Let's keep rolling. You guys are good with all of those, so we're going to keep on rolling. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add, subtract, and even multiply, and even divide these bad boys. Okay, so that's why we have to split this lesson into little 2 parts here. Okay, I don't want to overwhelm anybody. All right, but here we go. When looking at this problem, would you call that an addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division problem? Without a doubt, that's an addition problem. Why? Because I have 2 quantities and it's separated by a plus sign. So the first thing you have to do in math, in order to add these two guys together, you've got to get rid of parentheses. And if you look in front of each one of these quantities, you have a ichi. And the only way you can get rid of parentheses is if you multiply. So let's distribute that 1. Woo, that's a little funky color. Let's distribute that 1 in there, and I would get the same thing back. Let's distribute that positive 1 in there, and I get the same thing back. Now, what did that do? That eliminated the parentheses. And when it eliminated the parentheses, I can now combine like terms. A foe and a negative foe is 0, and a negative 3i with a positive 3i is 0, which is 0. So everything goes away. 0 is my answer. Okay, that is how you add or subtract complex. It's very important to know that is not multiplying. People see parentheses and they think, oh, we get to do the FOIL method and distribute like crazy. No, no, not if what's separating them is a subtraction or addition sign. All right, so if I'm looking at this one for sure is a subtraction problem. Why? Because I have two quantities, but they're separated by a subtraction symbol. Okay, so remember, I've got to get rid of parentheses. How do I get rid of parentheses, class? Well, you've got to multiply. There's an ichi in front of both of those. So I have to distribute that ichi, and I get 5 minus 3i. What's interesting about this ichi is it's negative, which is very important, right? It's going to change signs. Okay, now when I combine like terms, that's a positive 5 and a positive 2, which gives a 7, right? And then I have a negative 3i and a negative 4i, which gives me a negative 7i. And booyah, there's my answer. We normally, in complex numbers, usually write the I second. Okay? And I just want you to be familiar with that, because that's how it would be written as a multiple choice question on your SATs. All right, let's see. Let's do one more of these bad boys. I think the negative usually throws off students the most. So let's do another negative 1. Okay, let's go ahead and do B. All right, we'll do B, which would be 1 plus 5i minus 3. So it's important to write it out again, because it helps you to remember what type of problem it is, right? When I wrote this out, I said minus, right? So that means it's a subtraction problem, right? I have an imaginary ichi in front of both of these guys, which is important here because that's actually a negative 1. Okay, so I have to distribute, which would be 1 plus 5i, negative 3 plus 2i. Be very careful. Collect your like terms. That's a negative 2. Collect the i's. That's another 7. And booyah, that's it. All right, well, Mr. T, how does this get tougher? Well, believe it or not, it can get a little bit tougher when we deal with multiplication. Right here, we're dealing with multiplication because what is in between? Right, if I was to write this out, I would write 3i, no minus, no plus. So that would mean multiplication, right? Which is booyah. So then we just do what we've always done, okay, which is we distribute. Now, there's only one term here, so I just got to distribute like that. Now, 3 times negative 5 would be negative 15i, okay? And then 3i times 2i would be plus. Those would be like x's. What's x times x? X squared, right? So what's I times I? I squared, okay? So I squared. Now, there's a very important property we have for i's. The square root of negative 1 is I. Remember that? If you have 2 of these guys, that would be I times I, which would be I squared. So believe it or not, if you do a square root times a square root, you get itself. So I squared, believe it or not, is equal to negative 1. Okay? Just like the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is 5. Okay, so the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1. All right, so when we see this right here, you actually have to simplify. And you should show work. Whenever you have an I squared, you turn it into a negative 1. And if I do that, I get negative 15i minus 6. And then I said earlier on the SAT, they usually write the I second. So we're going to keep common with that. So we dominate that SAT, and you get to go to whatever college you want to. Goody goods? All right, let's keep rolling here. I think you guys are doing a great job at home. We're going to deal with multiplication on a little bit of a more complex right there. Boom. So there's a lot of distributing going on. Once again, it's important to write it out and say it. Quantity 4 plus 3i. Oh, it's not a minus. It's not a plus sign. So that means it's got to be times. Okay, so remember, this is just major distributive property. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 4 and I got to share it with both of those dudes. So it's going to be negative 4 minus 8i. That guy's donezo. Then I'm going to take the second guy and I'm going to share that with both of those guys. Okay, which gives me a negative 3i minus a 6i squared. 6i squared. Now, what's I squared again? Let's simplify that here. Ooh, let's combine those. Okay, kill two birds with one stone. And then I got negative 6 times negative 1. Well, negative 6 times negative 1, right? I got to do multiplication before I do any adding or subtracting now, right? Because now I have multiplication. So I got plus 6. Ooh, those are like terms. So then I get a 2 minus 11i. Boom, donezo, done. If you got that one, you're pretty good to go in terms of adding, subtracting, and multiplication. Where it gets a little bit rougher is when we get to some division ones, okay? And that's why we have a second video just for those guys. Which one should I do here? I'm just going to do one of them. Let's go ahead and do C. I think something interesting happens with C. Okay, but these would all be multiplication problems because if I was to write those out, I wouldn't say minus or plus. It would be multiplication. All right, let's go ahead. Share that negative 4 to 2 times, right? And I would get 16 plus 20i. And then I share that guy's done. Once I share the first guy with everything, donezo. Now I share the second guy with everything, right? Negative 20i, and that would be, what would that be? Minus 25i squared. Oh, snap. Spling, spling. Same exact thing, which means they go away. Okay? Okay, that'd be 16. How interesting is that? Whoa, I got ahead of myself. And that is equal to 41. So the i's went away. How cool is that? That's going to come up big time when we divide some of these bad boys, okay? All right, how about that? The I totally went away in that problem. Pretty interesting if you ask me. All right, let's just do one more of these bad boys. And you know which one I'm going to do is the one that usually messes students up the most, and that would be 26. Okay, 9 plus 4i squared. Most students make a mistake here. I want you to hit pause and just write down your first step, and let's see if you made the mistake. Okay, what do most students here that make a mistake? They do that first, and you're supposed to do exponents. But exponents you cannot, not allowed, no way, Jose. You don't distribute exponents. So when you see an exponent up there, what it means is you have two of these bad boys. Okay, you got two. So if I got two of them, I got to write both of them out. Now I can distribute that 9 to both of those guys. Okay, and I've got it, that guy's done, and I've got to distribute that 4i to both of those guys. Okay, and that'd be plus 16i squared. Those guys can be combined. 72i plus 16 times negative ichi. And then I get 81 plus 72i minus 16. And I get a final answer of 65 plus 72i. Donezo! All right, now I think that's it for this lesson. And then we're going to get a little crazy with dividing these guys. Yes. And we're going to have to talk about that a lot in the next lesson. So alohas. Keep up with everything. Come in for help if you guys need it. But so far, you guys are dominating. Continue to dominate.